which profession attracts the worst kinds of people? Story 1. I'm a casino dealer. Men losing money brings out the worst traits in people, particularly when I dealing high-limit games. Additionally, the supervisor's pit bosses won't boot someone who is literally spending thousands of dollars. It doesn't matter what they do or say. The casino doesn't want to lose those kinds of patrons. They're catered to. They can be so awful to the dealers. The work has helped me look at mankind in an entirely new perspective. Pro relationship tip: bring a date to the casino and see how they treat the dealer. If they're losing, you'll see what kind of person they really are. I have about 10 years of experience in the industry. Story 2. I have some friends who are stockbrokers. I adore them. But man, they're both amateur artists rather than skilled salespeople who could convince you to buy anything. Now it's like they make it up as they go along and try to sound confident in what they say. I have met a couple of people who are successful, lifelong stockbrokers. You actually need to enjoy what you do in order to be a successful stockbroker for the rest of your life. They all had crazy eyes. Each and every one. Story 3. Working in law enforcement can be a double-edged sword because it attracts both the best and the worst individuals. The worst in individuals who wish to exact control over other people. Power-hungry bastards who are insecure and have short fuses and poor tolerance for discipline. You can't handle someone defying you without losing your shit. You shouldn't be a cop. Story 4. Mental health experts appear to fall into one of the following groups: a lovely, angelic, and highly qualified people who sincerely want to assist drug users and alcoholics. There may be 20 of the counselors optimistically be burnt out, incompetent, lazy, don't care types. Another 60 are C-absolute personality disordered, narcissistic, Machiavellian, sadistic types who really get off on the enormous power and control they have over the lives and fates of the people under their care. Maybe another 20. Your mileage may vary. The last gathering can do a significant amount of harm. This makes me very grateful for not having ever encountered anyone in category CC so far. To wield power like that over people at their absolute most desperate. I would also say to anyone, don't let the fear of those types stop you from getting the care you need. The category A, people make it worth it. Story 5. I'm definitely going to receive some flake for this. The military, the U.S. Army, to be precise, probably 99 of soldiers are good, honest people. The job's stressful nature just simply lures some sickos. The Army does everything that it can, but it takes a long time to kick someone out of the Army. Source: 6 years active duty. Story 6. I swear to God, marketers have an extraordinary ability for rationalizing unethical acts. Perhaps because piece rates are so frequently paid. People will essentially say or do anything to make a sale, even if it is wholly untrue. But wow, salesmen seem like they would sell their mom to the devil for a quarter if given the opportunity. Story 7. There are lots of great people in that field, but it also attracted the most manipulative and destructive asshole I've ever known. He's a licensed therapist now, and I feel sorry for anyone who crosses his path. I am a graduating psychology student, and I would guess that roughly 30 of students were incredibly compassionate, sensitive individuals who were enthusiastic about helping others. The rest comprise a number of the most disturbed, unpleasant people I have ever met in my life. Prior to studying psychology, I spent a year studying computer science, and on the whole, the computer science students were far more sympathetic. Story 8. A lot of people who work in restaurant kitchens are ex-felons. Those who basically are divided into two categories: ones who are getting their shit back together and those who are just between jail sentences. The former are typically more beneficial colleagues than the average person. The last one tend to be assholes, volatile, and unpredictable. Story 9. In my experience, literally every profession ever, every job I've ever worked has had shitheads, liars, thieves, abusers, and just nasty people. You're better off avoiding. It's a sad reality that at least 1 out of every 5 persons is a pure shithead. Story 10. Intelligent people who specialize in very narrow fields without taking into account social interaction or the real world, despite being told they are the best in the world at those particular subjects. Which is true, but fewer people care about it than academics believe. You end up with an unnecessarily toxic environment of people trying to intellectually one-up each other and throw anyone off the ladder on their way up. It's a nasty, cruel, petty, and poisonous place to be. My friend is in academia, and my God, could he be the perfect fit for it? I'm too exhausted to list all of his toxic and unfavorable characteristics, but the majority of them revolve around his extreme superiority complex. Since it's impossible to make new friends, the only reason we remain friends is because he plays games with me online. Story 11. Unpopular opinion, but nurses. There is a lot of toxic, abusive, high school girl drama type behavior among nurses. It's such an important job, and about half the people doing it shouldn't be responsible for yogurt, let alone a human being's life. I've seen some shit, man. The mom executives in Story 12. Such executives were clients of mine as a consultant. When our expert informed them that they required a policy on diversity, equality, and inclusion, the CO stated that they didn't need someone in Washington telling them how to operate their firm. Apparently, the HR expert was just stating that they required it to prevent litigation, not even that they needed it in an ethical sense. The CEO still refused, so legally exposing yourself to own the lib seems like a pretty awful type of person. Story 13. After the Great Recession, I worked in a bank. The bank was close to a collection agency, so the workers would come in to cash their checks because many of them had wrecked their own credit so badly they couldn't open a checking account. They were freaks of nature, these people. If you ever felt bad about yourself, I swear to God, maybe don't look the way you want to. Maybe you could lose a few pounds. All you had to do was take one look at them. I promise that you would be an Abercrombie & Fitch model in comparison. Story 14. Oilfield workers. They might not immediately begin off bad, but after being close to each other and removes material from their families, they become total monsters and often live twofold lives. FO. Fly in, fly out. Works people up. I have worked with people who have done it, and even the ones who weren't total psychos have admitted it was dragging them that way. Heard stories about perfectly ordinary guys working at a mining job for 2-3 years just offing themselves out on the site one day. Nothing was forewarned. It's nothing to do with the work itself. But a lot of people only think they can handle the long stints in the isolation and in an emotionally draining environment. A lot of the sort of people who thrive are more than willing and able to make it worse on those who struggle. I had one coworker, a self-admitted shit stirrer who I swear kept a tally on the inside of his locker. Of all the people he'd either made quit or get fired, and he was far from the worst. Story 15. Any which gives you some sort of power over others. Whether it is something as simple as telling people what to do to the more nefarious things, being in a position where people have to follow what you tell them brings in the worst of people seeking to abuse it. Story 16. I am one, and more often than not, I meet other stylists who are super catty and stuck up. Textbooks mean girls. Thankfully, I work in a spa where everyone has more of a caregiver focus, so we all look out for each other. Story 17. As a toon animator, you really can't go 5 minutes without seeing degenerated people using this craft to act out their sexual fantasies and putting it in their professional work. I mean, all the shit you saw in most 90s, early aughts children's TV shows really was just cringeworthy, especially since all that had started to come out about guys like Dan Schneider and John Ferflozzi. It really makes you think what else was going on, Lowell. Story 18. Volunteer supervisor type positions in nonprofit. We sometimes have to rely on volunteers for jobs which normally would be paid positions in corporations. The people who want jobs, would power over other people, and are willing to do it for free are often some of the nastiest, abusive people you'll ever meet. You're not going to find a normal person for it. You just have to assess if they'll be tolerable or not. Story 19. Management consulting. I worked in that belly of a beast for a bit, and I realized I couldn't get along or fit in for a good reason. To be fair, there are some good people that end up leaving and exit opportunities, but I have my doubts about people who immerse themselves in that kind of culture and remain for a long time. It takes a special type of person to uphold a certain value and belief system to enjoy working overnight, selling work to clients that frankly amounts to PowerPoint slides heavily lifted from another client project only to be scrapped. Nothing feels proprietary, yet we sell like it is. We often made jokes that it didn't really feel anything was a value treat. Colleagues, clients, managers, everyone. All the same, the level of customer-client-facing personality, I get faking. It is important in life, but I've seen people adopt whole 180. Personas just to fit in 24/7, 365 people judge you immensely, and in order to succeed and be put onto good projects, you need to hide anything about your brand as liability. Being likable, I'd argue, is more important in some cases than doing a good job, except the reality that they can be fired in an up or out culture where people who aren't promoted are asked to leave. In my honest opinion, consulting is a marketing machine with a questionable value proposition. If you enjoy titles, money, no sleep and health downfalls with soulless work, it attracts you. Story 20. The ones close to management are two-headed snakes waiting to bite you in the ass. The ones in recruiting are just incompetent. At one company I was at, a recruiter went on vacation but didn't schedule any of their interviews. I thought that was messed up until I went to a different company, and it's happened again multiple times. Maybe they just know how hard it is to get fired because they're the people that do the firing. Story 21. Youth counselors and pastors. One would come to our school when I was a kid. He went to the church with the principal. One time a kid made a joke teasing him and he choked the kid. No joke. It was in middle school. This adult was unrestricted in her ability to mingle with children. Another one in town sold weed to underage girls exclusively. Plus, you always hear about them being pals. It happens so much it's crazy. Story 22. I worked on an ambulance for 7 years at numerous agencies along the east coast of the U.S. There's almost no barrier to entry for that job, and companies hire anyone with a pulse. All the people that are too fucked up to qualify for the military or police swarm into this job and bring all their toxicity with them. Racism, assault, and patient abuse was rampant, and everything gets swept under the rug. The only people I ever saw fired from EMS were the ones that went to state agencies to report any of these occurrences. As a result, any given EMS company you see is rife with abuse and staffed by people with barely any medical training at all. Story 23. They're meant to empower the children in their care, but instead spend their time gossiping and nitpicking between themselves about the children, about their families, each other, and every other staff member, almost everybody they come into contact with. Story 24. I don't know why, but really famous rappers have some kind of curse attached to them. A lot of rappers die horrible deaths, usually in violent crimes. Alley singers or actors have the privilege of destroying themselves with drugs, car accidents, and poor life decisions. A number of rappers grew raised in terrible areas and still reside there or recently relocated to a horrible place. That's why it seems like rappers are getting killed a lot more. Story 25 politics, all kinds of professions where one can work with the vulnerable and weak children, mentally challenged, sick, and all professions that give you power over other people. Those are only done well by people with exceptionally good moral compass and what some call the calling. Story 26. Serial killers frequently try to launch careers where they have arbitrary power and appear to be in authority. They also tend to be immediately kicked out of those professions and are relegated to the lowest form of authority, like security guard or animal control. Yet you stated were drawn not truly accomplished. Story 27. Grocery stores attract the worst kinds of people. It's where society's underclass typically ends up. There's always conflict and high turnover because shitty people end up in middle management and make it hell for everyone else. I've known lots of people that worked in retail, and it's usually always the same story. Story 28. I might get flack for this, but cops. It doesn't matter if only 20 of them are power-tripping racist jerks. I am generally terrified of police officers. There is no process to prevent those personality types from having a job as an officer of the peace. All it takes is one asshole cop tormenting you for fun to ruin your life. Story 29. Surprisingly, what I've learned is that construction is way more of a cesspool. Mistresses with corporate credit cards paying their rent, brothers suing brothers not paying overtime as required by statute. Just fraud of every kind I can imagine. Seriously? Never trust a general contractor or even subcontractors. They spend more time lying than working, other than the rare good ones. Also, all kinds of people turn into the worst kind of people. When someone dies and everyone starts fighting over the inheritance. Gross, have some class. Story 30. There's a not insignificant portion of people in animal rescue that are sociopathic narcissists that use animal rescue as a way to garner sympathy, attention, and distract from how absolutely batshit crazy they are. They don't care about the animals. After they've been taken into care, it all relies on the diligent volunteers who really deal with the physical pet. They're just entirely focused on the Russian attention they get from the initial rescue and posting about it on social media. My personal experience with this also included Spite rescuing his. Rescue was beyond capacity for decades at least. Every time a long-term volunteer burns out and begs him to stop taking in animals because we can't provide proper care for the ones we had, he'd basically bully them into leaving and then go out of his way to rescue more animals as soon as they're gone. This has escalated to the point where there's no other rescue in the country that could possibly hope to take in the animals if he gets shut down, which he will eventually given the standards he fails to maintain. Story 31. Landlords who buy up all the adequate housing they can find either to rent characteristics out as vacation rentals or to not have to work themselves and use their property is to pay their own bills. Not saying every landlord is bad, and technically it's not a profession. Story 32. Hedge fund managers and stockbrokers. If you think police or essential workers are the worst kinds of people, you have your head up your ass. Those professions are underpaid, underappreciated, and the most abused jobs in America. Wall Street attracts scumbags who would sell their own kids if there would be a profit to be made. They will happily, and with malice aforethought, wreck the whole economy as long as they get theirs. Story 33. If you aspire to nothing less than Bezos, Zuckerberg, Gates, degrees of money and influence, tech startups are the way to get there. Even banking has a much lower ceiling, but a much higher average outcome. But 90s of the folks in tech, particularly the rank and file, are great, geeky individuals who simply want to make new stuff for people. There is undoubtedly a loud, conspicuous minority of individuals in this industry for whom simple hundreds of millions of dollars would indicate a failure. And you can imagine just what sorts of things they're willing to do to get there. Story 34. Politicians and many times enforcement agencies, they often are excellent at deceiving the public and don't think the law applies to them. Scary people. Narcissists are often attracted to these fields because they love to win, be the hero, and to be praised. Although not all, there are far too many who are. Power does strange things to even the nicest people. Story 35. The most consistent profession with terrible people I have dealt with are mortgage brokers, specifically ones that do not work for banks. They are simply interested in getting you qualified for a loan, but rather sell that shit to Fannie Freddie ASAP. Too many are used car salesmen parading as professionals, and that is what these brokers are, salespeople. I have genuinely had more honest experiences with auto salespeople than mortgage agents. Story 36. There are basically two types. Type 1 is there to make sure you can do your job, have everything you need, are fully trained up, etc. Solve any issues and take up slack. Type 2 thinks they are there to make sure you are doing your job and shouting equals authority. These are the types who are more attracted to the sense of superiority, the money, and the perceived lack of work they think a manager does. They typically climbed up the current manager's asshole by playing a good game and putting other people down rather than by skill or knowledge. People will sell their own kids if they felt it would bring them more power and gravitas. These individuals are unquestionably correct at all times. They can cop all day long, and you are expected not to bring attention to it. However, when any of the peasants make a slight mistake, it has to be shouted from the rooftops. The long game for these people is to get in good with higher management, calling on them to back them up if anything does go wrong. In my experience, there are far more of type. Type sort of people generally just become beaten down over time when they realize they're surrounded by type 2s who would also absolutely backstab them if they think type 1 of these is making them look bad. Most places I've worked at are dominated by type 2. In my current place, we've had 3 managers come in from outside after one left and not one of them stayed once they realized what they were up against.